Hello, my friends. D.L. Anderson here. Welcome back to Transformation by Truth podcast as we share the truth concerning these last days and what you must do to save yourself from the violent times that are just ahead. Today's podcast is a word of truth accounting of the end times. The end is coming. The end is near. Today's podcast is entitled End Times 643, Reigning Over Ignorance and Deception, Part 3. The path you must follow to unlock the power of effectual prayer. The podcast objectives are restate why misunderstanding is one of the 7 deadliest drivers of lawlessness, reveal how your prayers are disqualified before you ever pray, reveal how you defeat reasonable doubt and misunderstanding, and reveal how you can succeed in the spiritual court of prayer and law. Welcome. Now, before we begin today's lesson, I would like to welcome all my beloved brothers and sisters in Yahushua Messiah who have been scattered to the 4 corners of the earth, who Yahuwah has joined to this ministry for such a time as this. I would also like to welcome anyone who is engaging our podcasts or videos for the first time. We trust you were led by the set apart spirit in finding us. And if you continue to be led, we hope you stay with us. For these are troubling times, and an evil day is just ahead. To this end, if you are watching this video on YouTube and you have not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button below, and you will be alerted whenever we post new videos. Also, if you have any questions at the conclusion of this video, you can ask them using the link in the podcast description below the video player. Last but not least, if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so YouTube can share it with believers like us. The bigger issue at the most critical juncture. Shalom, my beloved brothers and sisters, and welcome to day 654 of our exposition of lawlessness. In the most recent podcast, we analyzed 2 of the deadliest drivers of lawlessness: enter reasonable doubt and misunderstanding. Now, although misunderstanding is a bigger issue on a more universal scale, reasonable doubt is the bigger issue at the most critical juncture in your quest for holiness, perfection, and everlasting life. That is the juncture between consideration and understanding. Now, the reason why this juncture is so critical is sure. Vis-a-vis, understanding marks the point of no departure within the progression of life. That is the point where no external force can snatch you out of the Father's hand. Praise Yah. Now, seeing how your ascension to this spiritual plane is a game changer, the enemy will use one of the deadliest drivers of lawlessness to stop you. Enter misunderstanding, the second of the 7 deadliest drivers of lawlessness. Notwithstanding, as deadly as misunderstanding is, he is not looking to do battle on an even playing field. Quite the contrary, he employs the services of all the degrees and drivers of lawlessness within your mind and your heart to help him in his campaign to prevent you from unlocking the power of understanding. And the deadliest driver at this juncture is reasonable doubt. Now, we analyze the great threat of reasonable doubt in Monday's podcast. And now we must address how we will deal with this threat. To wit, we must analyze the path you must follow to add the power of understanding to the power of consideration. Otherwise, we will be as the masses who know nothing, and yet they are filled with information. Let's get started. To disqualify your prayer before you start. Now, first things first, there are many places we could start in following the path to your victory over reasonable doubt. And yet, I believe it makes the most sense to continue with the example of the course, which we initiated in Monday's podcast. Not only this, but I believe it is also fitting that we use one of the most common examples on this wise to see how consideration evolves into understanding. Enter the example of prayer. Let's make it happen. Now, the procedure begins with you attempting to engage the Most High Elohim in prayer. In this order, the event of prayer takes on the form of a trial. To wit, you are making your case to the Most High Elohim as to why he should move on your behalf. Now, if your prayer is aligned with Yahuwah's will, then he will answer your prayer. Simple enough. However, ascending to a spiritual plane where your prayers are consistently aligned with Yahuwah's will is not simple. Trust me, it will be one of the hardest things you ever do. The reason why is sure. It is because reasonable doubt is like a prosecutor whose primary purpose is to destroy your case. Ergo, he works very hard to disqualify your prayer at the start by ensuring that you don't fully understand the will of Elohim. That's the key, my friends. Vis-a-vis, your prayers will never be aligned with Yahuwah's will if you don't fully understand his will. And this is why reasonable doubt, as a competent prosecutor, will most assuredly destroy your case. And in destroying your case, he will disqualify your prayer, for you went to the Most High Elohim without ensuring that you had a solid case, even if there was a case to be made. And this is the goal of reasonable doubt, to disqualify your prayer before you ever pray. How you build a case that is approved by Elohim. Now, seeing how failed prayers are apt to destroy our faith in Elohim, this is a crucial matter you must appreciate and understand. To wit, you can ascend all the way to the plane of knowledge, and yet, if you fail to unlock the power of understanding, it will all be for naught. Therefore, I advise you to hear me carefully as I say, your battles with reasonable doubt and misunderstanding are some of the most critical battles you will ever fight in your quest. Here is why. If you fail to gain the victory at this interval in your quest, you will never unlock the power to receive the knowledge of the will of Elohim. Here lies the problem. To wit, if you don't know Yahuwah's will, then you can't do Yahuwah's will. And if you can't do Yahuwah's will, then you are not in Yahuwah's will. And thus, you are not insulated from the cares of this life and the troubles of this world. Not only this, but you will never unlock the power of effectual prayer. Ergo, you would forfeit the life of abundance that has been reserved for all the children of Elohim and all the precious promises he has given us. Now, I could continue addressing the endless benefits you will lose out on if you fail to succeed this interval in your quest. But I believe it is more pressing that we analyze how you can succeed. That said, the question of the hour is quite simply this: how do you defeat the ruach of reasonable doubt and misunderstanding so that you can receive the knowledge of Elohim and unlock the power of effectual prayer? The answer is sure, and it begins with understanding their strategy. As I say, reasonable doubt wants to disqualify your prayer before you pray. Ergo, he entices you into presenting your case to Elohim, even though you don't have a case that will be approved by Elohim. Now, that said, the next question we should consider is, how do you build a case that will be approved by Elohim? That, my friends, is the question and the key to defeating reasonable doubt and misunderstanding. Ergo, we should pivot this discussion to answering this question. Let's get to work. Now, first of all, allow me to state the obvious. Vis-a-vis, you must be walking in the fear of Elohim, which means you are reigning over all the degrees at the foundation of lawlessness, which means you are operating in the following 16 degrees of perfection: hope, trust, reliance, faith, compliance, conformance, transformation, obedience, honesty, righteousness, purity, virtue, values, reverence, worship, and the fear of Elohim. My dear friends, hear me carefully as I say, if you are not operating in these 16 degrees of perfection, then you will never defeat reasonable doubt and misunderstanding in spiritual battle. And if you think otherwise, consider this: the man who does not walk by faith is not even reigning over doubt, to wit, the form of doubt that is unreasonable. Ergo, the man who is not reigning over doubt has no chance of winning any battle with misunderstanding and reasonable doubt. Facts. And thus, the verdict is clear. The first box you must check to give yourself a fighting chance in this battle includes the 16 degrees at the foundation of the pinnacle of holiness. Now, if you check this box, the next box you must check is consideration, i.e., the fundamental degree of knowledge, and one we have discussed extensively in recent weeks. Here is how you check this box. You must gather enough evidence to harden your case, for the evidence is used to prove your case. That said, the million-dollar question is this: what is your case and how did it come to you? That, my friends, is the question, and we will address it in the next section. Let's keep going. Obtaining a conviction in the spiritual court of prayer and law. Now, the answer to the first half of the question is sure. A case is your evaluation of the Father's will for your life. It is what you believe should happen. And so you will engage the Father in prayer so that he will act in accordance with your evaluation of his will. Now, this brings us to the second half of the question and the more critical matter, to wit, how did you arrive at a case? The answer is sure. Your case is an evolution of your evaluation of Yahuwah's will. This is why the first box you must check includes the 16 degrees at the foundation of the pinnacle of holiness. For if you don't check this box, you will be making your case whilst you operate in the 16 degrees at the foundation of lawlessness. And those degrees are despair, noncompliance, dishonesty, amorality, distrust, nonconformance, unrighteousness, irreverence, self-reliance, complacency, defilement, blasphemy, doubt, disobedience, contempt, and prejudice. Now, anyone who thinks they can A, make an honest and accurate evaluation of Yahuwah's will, and B, engage him in effectual prayer, whilst they are infected with these spiritual strongholds, is spiritually insane. And here's the worst part. People do it every day. To wit, they try to engage the Father in effectual prayer, even though their case was dismissed before they ever prayed. Now, let me tell you something. An ineffectual prayer life is the primary reason why men and women become spiritual failures. Remember, prayer is not only one of the 7 pillars of our faith, but it is also the primary driver of spiritual growth. Ergo, the man who cannot engage the Father in consistent, progressive, and effectual prayer is not growing in his set apart spirit. Look here. You can engage in all the studies you want, and you can search the scriptures until you die. But let me tell you something. If Yahuwah is not engaged when you pray, your spiritual life will at some point be based upon a lie. To wit, the lie that you are a child of the Most High, and yet when you pray, he is not listening to what you have to say. Now, I could go on, but again, I believe the verdict is clear. If you operate in the ruach of doubt, disobedience, contempt, and prejudice, your prayers may go up, but Yahuwah will not hear. Deal with it. Now, that said, and for the sake of high time, we should shift the conversation to analyzing the third and final box we must check to ensure the case we make is approved by Elohim. Enter acceptable evidence. Now, the masses will fail to meet the standard of acceptable evidence because they are infected with lawlessness. Ergo, their evidence will be faulty. Ergo, they will not have a case. On the other hand, those who are walking in the fear of Elohim will evaluate the will of Elohim by the standards of truth, honesty, and righteousness, and thus their evaluation will generate evidence that is admissible in the spiritual court of prayer and law. Now, here lies the inflection, to wit, there is a juncture in this development where you have enough evidence to meet your burden of proof. And when you meet your burden of proof, you, my friend, will obtain a conviction. Therefore, and as it is my custom, I will provide a definition for conviction to ensure that we are considering this factor of perfection from a uniform spiritual perspective. By definition, a conviction is a firm belief that evolves in concert with your spiritual evolution, which allows you to be convinced, which elevates your belief from firm to fixed. The act or process of finding a person guilty of a crime in a court of law. Now, there are many revelations in this definition, and yet we should focus on the fact that a conviction is the act or process of finding a person guilty of a crime in a court of law, which in the spiritual court of prayer and law translates into the following. Get this. Obtaining a conviction in the spiritual court of prayer and law means that you have convinced the Most High Elohim to agree with your prayer. Ergo, he will answer your prayer because you, my friend, checked all the boxes as you took the time to build a solid case that he would approve. Now, there are many revelations stemming from this revelation, and we will address these next week as we continue analyzing the path you must follow to unlock the power of effectual prayer. Until then, my dear friends, you must remember this. The outcome of your prayer is determined before you ever pray. So take the time to build a solid case, and he will hear what you have to say. Now, here is the final word. To keep thy soul from day to day, agree with the Most High before you pray. Brothers and sisters, hear me carefully as I say, we are indeed delving into spiritual science, and yet it is a simple science to understand. The problem is the masses lack understanding, and thus they have no path to agreement with Elohim, which is why their prayers will fail. And the worst part is that oftentimes they won't know that their prayers have failed until it's too late, for only time and chance can tell. Heretofore, I recommend don't go to the Most High with worthless, baseless requests. You're a fool if you try, for the man who asks amiss will never be heard, and he will forever wonder why. Selah. Now, here is today's assignment. Meditate on today's lesson, and if you have any questions, please submit them using the form at pinnacleofholiness.com, and I will respond to you as soon as I can. Now, here is what's next. We completed today's podcast, End Times 643, Reigning Over Ignorance and Deception, Part 3. And the next podcast is entitled Greater Works You Shall Do, Part 3. I will post this podcast on Friday, April 17th, 2026. Until then, my friends, Continue to be led by the Spirit of Elohim. Continue to watch. Continue to pray. Continue in fasting. And most of all, continue to be focused, for the end is coming. The end is near.